Maximizing authentication workflows. Sorry for the long title there, but I promise this presentation will be worth it for sure.
It'll be worth it.
It will be worth it. So my name is Harjeet Kaur. I'm a senior product designer at Imprivata. I have experience working with 3 different types of organizations that utilize authentication workflows. One is a small organization that creates products with authentication processes. And then I worked at an enterprise that owns franchises and businesses that want to centralize their login with single sign-in. And now I work at an enterprise in Imprivata that designs authentication products. In my experiences, these various types of organizations, I saw the value of login, registration, and verification workflows really make an impact in defining business goals. In this talk, I want to show how these workflows can impact organizational decisions and even help define requirements. The basis of UX workflows is user research and really good usability principles. So, they're the key elements for defining a good process, and that process can really help make those large organizational decisions. All right. So as UX designers, we create workflows that show a product's pathway based on user needs and business goals. And so what makes login and authentication workflows so special is that they are the gatekeepers ensuring that only the right users get access to the right places, all while prioritizing simplicity and security. And now I want you to think of a time where access was made easy for you. Maybe you were logging on to your phone to get access to an app. And maybe you're relieved that you don't have to do so many steps to get to that app. But you're probably also wondering, how secure is that information? Well, this could be social media apps or banking, but there's a lot that goes into workflows to create that simple experience. And many large organizations are taking steps towards that centralized authentication. And what we find are challenges in adapting that authentication across their businesses and products. However, many of those challenges are better communicated and resolved with UX workflows. And these flows, and this is a very simple flow here, this is not the flow, but they uncover procedures that interfere with user needs while also providing solutions to organizational issues. In currently working for an identity software company right now that sells authentication products, I see how the workflow prioritizes that need as well as user needs. And when I look back at working in organizations where that workflow was more secondary, I'm now able to see the impact it made on an organizational level and shaping strategic business decisions and organizational resilience. All right. Identifying principles in workflows. So here are some principles that impact organizational values that can be found in workflows. It's definitely not limited to these 5 values that I've shown here, but these are the ones that I see make the greatest impact. Identifying user pinpoints. By understanding where users may encounter difficulties and frustrations, businesses can prioritize improvements to the overall user experience. Enhancing security and compliance. By helping identify areas where security measures can be strengthened, workflows can make an impact on security features to comply to industry regulations or protect sensitive data. Streamlining authentication workflows. By identifying unnecessary steps or complexities in the process, and I'll show you in the workflow in the next slide, we can streamline authentication, improving overall efficiency. Choosing authentication methods. Methods like passwords, MFA, biometrics all have impacts on user experience and security. And UX workflows can provide a visual on how each method can assist in making decisions. Improving onboarding experience. This is one of the first interaction a user will have with a product, and usually the first time sharing their information. Seeing how that flow will look like will allow for planning on how users will familiarize themselves with authentication procedures. This creates a great onboarding experience, user experience as well. So the next slide, and throughout this presentation, I'm going to show how these points of discussions, principles, in the workflow, and how that information is extracted to guide organizational decisions. All right. The role of workflows. So here is a very simple general workflow I used for login. I kept it simple for simplicity and I'm just trying to keep it simple so that, I know there's a lot of stuff that goes on to accessing a website, user credentials, and onboarding processes, but this is a very higher level. And as I mentioned previously, some of the principles are identified in workflows. And here is like the information to extract it to get a better organizational highlight. So we're going to start with identifying pain points. It could be anywhere in the flow, honestly. The pain points could be in onboarding, it could be entering credentials, but when the user first accesses the website, we could identify better ways to access login. And are they a returning user? We could streamline authentication processes to make recognition verification easier for the user. As user enters their credentials to log in, what are other authentication methods we can explore to make a more secure or accessible process? If they're not a returning user, onboarding. If they are not a returning user, we can definitely do more information investigation. How do we get information from the user? The absolute minimal verification for simplicity's sake, or do we ask for more data for data purposes or customization purposes? And when the user does get access, what are some ways we can enhance the experience with features and also ensure a secure experience? And even looking at the administration flow down here, once the user gets verified or they have to enter a password or have some kind of communication with administration, how could this workflow better help us understand the different levels of the organization? And where can we find pain points to improve the process? Understanding different levels. So on the right here, I have a basic structure of a large organization I worked for. And it could be different for other organizations, but this specific enterprise was divided into sectors. And then that had several business. Each sector had a business or franchise under that sector. And under that business or franchise, they had product level businesses. So, there are their own hierarchies, and I wanted to show a visual of the different possible layers of hierarchy, but also the challenge a large organization faces when centralizing authentication. There is complexity involved. And when I worked at an enterprise at a single sign-in, when I was designing a single sign-in for the enterprise, we encountered small businesses having different methods of workflows. There was a challenge of discerning the different levels, departments, user roles, all involved in monitoring authentication. The goal was to integrate those practices into the broader enterprise authentication process. And workflows acted as a bridge to fill the gap and establish a more interconnected flow. One user workflow that I remember was an onboarding process confirming the necessary information needed to register a user. And so it opened up pathways in which the verification process could look like. And with the different levels of administrators responsible for approvals, that workflow was able to communicate with the right people and work together to fill the gaps of centralized login while also meeting compliance procedures. By understanding task flows at the product level, we have significant impact on decision-making at the organizational level. So if companies get this right in strategic decision-making, they can make it easier for customers to access a wide range of products and services in the company. But if they get it wrong, it could make a lot of work for customers who don't get the services because they just don't bother. Here's an example of two very basic task flows. One is at the product level, and then one is at the higher organizational level. Product level is basically the user accessing that specific product with their specific authentication, whereas higher level is single sign-in and being able to access the various products within that organization with that single sign-in. There are many action items and pathways. As you can see, the user's information, they have to enter their information to the provider to get the device. Then they have to submit information to the pharmacist to get the device. And then they have to have a consultation with the pharmacist or a business representative to get a biometric authentication, and then a secondary biometric authentication. And now the user can use their product on a day-to-day basis using that authentication, that biometric authentication, to deliver the drug to, multiple times a day. The higher organization level, the user is able to log in to access multiple products with the organization. And we found that users already had many pathways to verify themselves from the entire process of getting the device to actually using the device. So for large healthcare organizations at the higher level here that are implementing single sign-in for multiple businesses and products, this workflow provides them with multiple avenues in consolidating. So if you can imagine like imaginary lines between these two workflows, consolidating access pathways to achieve centralized authentication workflow. Now, going back to the product level, there are some good discussion points that align with product goals at product levels, such as accessibility considerations. And it's definitely worth looking into. And then also applying to higher organizational levels. And there's also awareness of technology. The product level can help us understand the foundation in which digital capabilities are built. And this information is valuable. Decision makers can align technology strategies, the various technologies that are used here to support infrastructure that aligns with higher organizational level goals. And as you can see from the business topics mentioned in the previous slide, those are still relevant to the conversation here as well. So we could still have all of these discussions as well, while also looking at the product level discussions. And they're all applicable in this centralized login. And in addition to integrating product level functions to higher level organizations, these workflows can also involve to incorporate business systems like email or CRM, so they could have a more unified access experience. Improving communication. Identity authentication workflows can reveal flaws in communication within an organization, which can help to improve procedures. For example, designing a workflow to password requirements can highlight the inconsistency of procedure and can cause confusion. This can be due to lack of communication, changes in updates, failure to deliver information to appropriate departments, deprioritizing and merging procedures. But this can also be an opportunity to standardize security protocols. It opens up an organizational discussion to restructure their policies and meet proper authentication processes. So when I worked at a large healthcare organization and we were looking at all these workflows in different businesses, different franchises, and how to incorporate those different workflows to the enterprise single login, we not only saw opportunities in consolidating technologies, but we also saw opportunities in business structure, the administration level, and really analyzing who's in charge of what and how the verification process can be better simplified. We also found that there was a lot of miscommunication within departments. So the verification process looked different from department to department. And that allowed us to actually come up with organizational solutions by looking at these workflows and help those departments come up with better processes. And while in that process, also figuring out an easier way to connect with single sign-in. Scalability and future-proofing. Scalability and future-proofing are great topics when it comes to implementing workflows in business decisions. Implementing a strategy where business and design work better together with UX tools, we can have and scale growth in an organization that ensures that security and infrastructure remains effective and relevant as business expands. And also, in consideration of emerging technologies such as biometrics or adaptive authentication, we can future-proof a lot of the workflows so that they remain effective against evolving security threats. And so, as you can see here, much like the tree, so you can see workflows are like the branches that expand with growing ideas, all in different directions. We can make strategic decisions that align with both user needs and business goals. These decisions contribute to a secure, efficient, and user-friendly authentication experience. And it ultimately impacts the success of the organizational digital systems and services as well. And I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
So there's a few things to break down there, if we may. So what I really liked about this talk and topic was how you came at it from such a micro level from like Tina had such a broad level of almost having to cover everything and the challenges of that. And you have in theory such a minute level, and there's still equal challenges to that. So, and that tied in with Diane's accessibility piece as well was really, really lovely. So thank you for that. What tools and pieces have helped with all of these processes?
That's a great question. When we design workflows, we collaborate on Miro a lot. So a lot of the times these workflows are on Miro, where product PM teams, project managers, engineers, developers can kind of jump in and see the higher level and more product level workflows. And so using those tools, they're able to comment on anything that's confusing, but then also they're able to brainstorm ideas and kind of leave it on a sticky note. And so that's a great collaboration tool. I've used Miro and Mural, so those are both really great tools. And now Figma is also great in collaborating. So when we're designing wireframes and they're actually looking at those screens, those workflows are coming to life. That is also another great tool to put everything in perspective.
Wow, yeah, really great. And looking outside of the work that you're doing, what have you seen as the most common challenges that like people facing this face in the approach?
Yeah, and a lot of this is more in higher organizations. I think it's easier to actually work in a smaller organization and figure out the hierarchy. But when you're working in large organizations, a lot of the smaller businesses that they own are already established. And a lot of them have their own systems and ways of working. So the challenge is figuring out who is in charge of the specific verification process, or who's in charge of what that needs to make the right decisions so that there is consolidation possible at a higher level. And so it's really finding who those users are and trying to get them in the same room to collaborate on a solution.
Yeah, really challenging in its own right.
Yeah.
And then going back to the projects that you've worked on, what in that process flow in that diagram that you shared, what was the biggest bottleneck, the most unexpected kind of bottleneck to that?
Oh, are we talking about the product level and organizational one?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that one was merging technologies. You know, a lot of the products in different businesses are using various types of technology. Some are using MFA, some are using biometric systems. And so the big bottleneck is, how do we make it easier for the user to also embrace single sign-in while also having to authenticate themselves with these biometrics to access the device to get the drug without it being an annoying process. So how do we make something simpler by adding something additional?
Yeah, it's interesting. And How much is security a factor in your process and considerations?
That is a great question. When we did user testing and trying to get feedback from users and what they found to be the most important in their process, the number one factor was how secure is their information, their data, and their drug. So it comes up, and again, it goes back to what are the best technology authentication tools that we can use to really secure that data.
Yeah, interesting. And then on a side note to user testing interviews, what tools or how did you approach? Was it interviews on the phone, or how did you approach user interviews?
Oh yeah, so we did a lot of user Zoom. So I would interview a lot of existing patients that use a product. User Zoom is great because we were able to define the audience we wanted based on the specific products they use from the company. So we got actual patients that use those specific products, and we were able to ask, according to current processes, and this was a process that was added, how would your workflow look like then? What are some of the challenges that you're facing? So investigating those challenges, we try to come up with solutions to ease that workflow.
Yeah, oh, amazing. And is there any final considerations you'd like people to take away from your talk?
Oh yeah, don't be too afraid to interview different departments, or really, I suggest user testing to the max. Do it for all the product level patients that are using it. Definitely get inside the organization, try to understand the verification process. Even if it's different, I wouldn't be too intimidated by it. There's so many solutions out there. And I think large organizations embracing single sign-in and even unified central login systems is a great thing. I think it's a great tool. And I think it's headed in a great direction in terms of using all these different authentication tools. And I'm really excited for the future for this.
Yeah, no, it's really fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Really, really appreciate it. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.